In 480 BC, the world witnessed the march of the largest army ever assembled, led by a king who fancied himself a god, descending upon Greece with the aim of crushing the world's first democracy. Their path was blocked by a narrow mountain pass, known as the Hot Gates, defended by a small band of Greeks, among them 300 of history's most disciplined warriors, the Spartans. This is the story of their legendary last stand, a battle destined to resonate through the ages as a symbol of unwavering courage against overwhelming odds. But what actually transpired at Thermopylae? And how did this small group of men alter the course of Western history? To truly grasp the significance of Thermopylae, we must journey back approximately 10 years to 490 BC, to the plains of Marathon. It was here that the initial Persian invasion of Greece, orchestrated by King Darius the Great, suffered a shocking and humiliating defeat. A smaller, highly motivated army, led by Athens, routed the Persian forces, compelling them to retreat across the Aegean Sea. For Darius, this defeat was an intolerable insult. He had sought to punish Athens for backing a Greek rebellion, but instead, his empire's reputation was severely tarnished. Darius vowed vengeance, but fate intervened, and he died before he could exact it. This burning desire for conquest was inherited by his son and successor, Xerxes III. Xerxes was not simply completing his father's unfinished business. He viewed himself as a ruler divinely ordained, destined to succeed where his father had failed. He was determined to crush the rebellious Greeks once and for all, not merely to punish them, but to incorporate all of Greece into his vast, ever-expanding empire. For 4 long years, Xerxes meticulously assembled the largest military force the world had ever seen. From every corner of his sprawling domain, stretching from Mesopotamia to India, from Egypt to Bactria, he conscripted soldiers. The ancient historian Herodotus claimed the army numbered in the millions, a figure that modern historians consider wildly exaggerated. Nevertheless, even the more conservative contemporary estimates are staggering, suggesting a land force of somewhere between 70,000 and 300,000 soldiers, supported by a massive fleet of over 1,200 warships. To facilitate this immense invasion, Xerxes ordered the execution of breathtaking engineering feats. He had a canal constructed through a peninsula to enable his fleet to circumvent a perilous coastline. Even more audaciously, he commanded a bridge made of ships to be erected across the Hellespont Strait, a mile-long pontoon bridge that allowed his army to literally march from Asia into Europe. When a storm destroyed the initial bridge, an enraged Xerxes reportedly ordered the water itself to be whipped 300 times and had the original engineers beheaded. This incident provides a clear indication of the character of the man leading the invasion. His power was absolute, and his resources seemed limitless. As news of this terrifying force spread, a wave of fear washed over the Greek city-states. Many northern states, seeing no hope of resistance, yielded to Persian authority. Greece was not a unified nation, but a collection of fragmented, often warring states. Now faced with the prospect of total annihilation, they were confronted with a choice: submit to the Persian king or unite and fight for their freedom. In this moment of crisis, a fragile alliance was forged, and leadership of their land forces was entrusted to Sparta, the state universally acknowledged as the greatest military power in Greece. To truly appreciate the events at Thermopylae, one must understand Sparta. Sparta was an anomaly in ancient Greece. While cities like Athens were experimenting with democracy, philosophy, and art, Sparta was dedicated to perfecting one deadly craft: war. Their entire society was structured as a machine designed to produce the world's finest soldiers. This system was known as the agoge. For a Spartan male, life was defined by the state from birth. Elders inspected newborns, and any infant deemed weak or imperfect was left on a hillside to die. Survival was the first crucial test. At the age of 7, boys were taken from their families and entered the agoge, a rigorous state-sponsored training program that spanned over a decade. They learned to read and write, but the primary focus of the curriculum was survival, discipline, and warfare. They lived in barracks and were deliberately underfed to encourage them to steal food, a valuable skill for military campaigns. If caught, they were severely punished, not for stealing, but for the incompetence of being discovered. They were taught to endure extreme pain without flinching, to obey any order without question, and to prioritize Sparta's welfare above their own lives. Their training was relentless, emphasizing peak physical fitness, weapon mastery, and the complex maneuvers of the phalanx formation. Spartan culture was renowned for its concise, witty remarks, now known as laconic phrases. Courage was considered the highest virtue, and cowardice the deepest shame. Soldiers who fled from battle were branded as outcasts, ostracized by society. The fear of this social death often outweighed the fear of dying in combat. Even Spartan women held a unique position in Greece. They were educated, participated in sports, and enjoyed a level of freedom unprecedented in other cities. Their primary role was to raise strong sons for Sparta. A famous Spartan saying encapsulates this: mothers would tell their sons to return from battle either with your shield or on it, meaning either victorious or dead. A soldier fleeing would have been forced to abandon his heavy shield. This was the system that molded King Leonidas and his 300 royal bodyguards, men forged in the crucible of the agoge, embodying the Spartan ideal. As Xerxes' monstrous army advanced southward, the Hellenic League, the Greek alliance, needed to devise a plan. The Athenian general Themistocles, a brilliant strategist, proposed a joint land and sea operation. The strategy involved blocking the Persian army at a narrow pass, while simultaneously intercepting the Persian navy at a narrow strait. This would prevent the fleet from flanking the land army and cutting off their supply lines. The chosen location for the land defense was a pass named Thermopylae, meaning hot gates in Greek, named for the local sulfur springs. Geographically, this was an excellent choice. In 480 BC, the pass was an extremely narrow corridor, perhaps only 100 meters wide, squeezed between steep mountains and the sea. This terrain would act as a force multiplier, neutralizing the Persians' greatest advantage, their overwhelming numbers, and forcing them into a brutal head-on engagement on equal footing. The task of defending this pass fell to Leonidas, one of Sparta's kings. However, a complication arose. The invasion coincided with two of the most sacred Greek festivals, the Olympic Games and Sparta's own festival of Carneia. During Carneia, Spartan law strictly prohibited any military action. Torn between sacred law and the imminent end of their world, the Spartan elders reached a compromise. They could not dispatch the entire army, but they would permit Leonidas to march north immediately with his personal bodyguard of 300 men. These were not ordinary soldiers, they were elite veterans handpicked by Leonidas. Herodotus adds a chilling detail. Leonidas specifically selected men who already had sons to ensure their family lines would not be extinguished. This suggests Leonidas was aware that this might be a one-way journey. Before his departure, Leonidas consulted the oracle at Delphi, the most revered spiritual authority in Greece. The oracle's prophecy was both terrifying and ambiguous. Hark! Ye men of Sparta of the wide-wayed streets, either your glorious town shall be sacked by the sons of Perseus, or if that be not the whole land of Lacedaemon, shall mourn the death of a king of the house of Heracles. The message was clear. Either Sparta itself would fall, or a Spartan king had to die. For a man like Leonidas, steeped in the Spartan code of duty and sacrifice, the choice was not a choice at all. He marched north to meet his destiny, gathering allies along the way. By the time he reached Thermopylae, the Greek force numbered around 7,000 men, a mix of Spartans, Thespians, Thebans, and others. It was a small force to confront an imperial juggernaut, but at the narrow hot gates, they would make their stand. Upon arriving at Thermopylae, the Greeks immediately began preparing their defenses. They rebuilt an old wall, the Phocian Wall, that blocked the narrowest part of the pass, and positioned their men behind it. The core of this army was the hoplites, the heavily armored infantrymen of ancient Greece. A hoplite was akin to a tank of the ancient world. He wore a bronze breastplate, bronze leg guards, and the iconic Corinthian helmet that covered his entire head. His primary weapon was a long spear called a doru, and for close quarters combat, he carried a short sword, the xiphos. However, his most crucial piece of equipment was the hoplon, a large round shield made of wood and bronze that protected him from neck to knee. Hoplites fought in a formation called the phalanx. They stood shoulder to shoulder, overlapping their shields to create a solid wall of bronze. The men in the front ranks extended their long spears forward, creating a deadly forest of spear points. A disciplined phalanx, especially in a confined space where it could not be flanked, was nearly impenetrable. This was the wall Leonidas planned to use to halt the Persian army. Soon the Persian army arrived, a sea of men and horses stretching as far as the eye could see. King Xerxes positioned his throne on a nearby hill to observe the battle. For 4 days, he remained idle, simply waiting. He genuinely could not believe that this tiny group of soldiers would dare to defy him. He sent a messenger demanding their surrender. According to the historian Plutarch, Leonidas's response was famously terse. Molon labe, meaning come and get them. Xerxes was confident that the mere sight of his army would cause the Greeks to flee. However, the Greeks remained steadfast. They calmly oiled their bodies, engaged in athletic exercises, and combed their long hair, a Spartan custom before battles they knew they might not survive. Xerxes' patience finally reached its limit. On the 5th day, he ordered the attack. The battle commenced not with a charge, but with a storm of arrows. Xerxes commanded his archers to fire, and Herodotus famously wrote that the arrows were so dense they obscured the sun. It was then that the Spartan Dinekes supposedly uttered his legendary remark, "Good, then we will have our battle in the shade." The Greeks simply raised their heavy shields, creating a shell of bronze that easily deflected the arrows. Frustrated, Xerxes sent in his first wave of 10,000 infantry, the Medes and Scythians, ordering them to capture the Greeks and bring them to him. The wave crashed against the Spartan shield wall, resulting in a massacre. The Persian infantry, with their shorter spears and wicker shields, were completely outmatched. Their shields shattered against the bronze hoplons, and their spears were too short to reach the Greeks. Meanwhile, the Greeks methodically stabbed forward from the safety of their phalanx. For the Persians, it was like running into a meat grinder. As men in the front fell, they were trampled by the ranks behind them. The pass quickly became choked with bodies. The Greeks, fighting in shifts to stay fresh, held their ground without yielding an inch. Observing from his throne, Xerxes was incensed. He had thrown thousands of his men at the Greeks, and they had been repelled with horrific casualties, while Greek losses were minimal. The first day was a complete disaster for the Persians and a resounding success for Leonidas. They had demonstrated that within the narrow confines of the hot gates, superior training and equipment could overcome seemingly impossible odds. But the day was not over, and Xerxes was about to unleash his best. As the first day drew to a close, a fuming Xerxes decided it was time to deploy his elite forces. He summoned his personal royal guard, the legendary unit the Greeks called the Immortals. This was a corps of 10,000 of the finest warriors in the Persian Empire, called Immortals, because if a soldier was killed or fell ill, he was immediately replaced, creating the illusion of an invincible, undying unit. These were professional soldiers, better armed than the regular infantry. They were a fearsome sight as they marched into the pass, their armor gleaming. Xerxes was certain that where the others had failed, his Immortals would succeed. He was wrong. The Immortals attacked the Greek line with disciplined fury, but the outcome was the same. They could not break the phalanx. During the fight, the Greeks employed a new tactic, the feigned retreat. The phalanx would pretend to break and run, luring the Persians into a disorganized chase. Then, on signal, the Greeks would suddenly turn, instantly reform their shield wall, and butcher the surprised and overextended enemy. Herodotus recounts that Xerxes literally jumped out of his throne 3 times in frustration as he watched even his most elite troops being cut to pieces. The pass was a slaughterhouse filled with the bodies of his best men. By the end of the second day, the Persians had suffered thousands of casualties. While the Greek line remained unbroken, the morale of the Persian army was plummeting. The truth is, Leonidas was aware of this path. He had stationed 1,000 Phocian soldiers on the mountain to guard it. Xerxes, seizing upon this betrayal, immediately dispatched his general, Hydarnes, and the elite Immortals to follow Ephialtes along the trail under the cover of darkness. The Persians marched through the night. As dawn broke, they stumbled upon the Phocian guards. According to Herodotus, The rustling of leaves from the advancing army was the first warning the Phocians received. After a volley of Persian arrows, the Phocians, believing they were the main target, retreated up the mountain to make a stand. This was a fatal mistake. The Persians were not interested in them. They simply ignored them and continued down the path to get behind Leonidas. A Phocian messenger scrambled down the mountain to deliver the devastating news to Leonidas. They were about to be trapped. The position was no longer defensible. The battle was lost. Leonidas immediately convened a meeting. With Persians poised to attack from both the front and the rear, the army faced certain annihilation. Most of the Allied commanders advocated for an immediate retreat to save the army for future battles. Leonidas concurred. He dismissed the bulk of the Greek army, ordering them to escape while they still could. This was not surrender. It was a strategic decision. The stand had always been intended as a delaying action, and by holding the pass for over 2 days and making the Persians pay dearly for every inch of ground, they had already achieved their objective. The most crucial task now was for the rest of the army to escape and continue the fight. However, Leonidas was not going anywhere. For a Spartan king, retreat was an unthinkable disgrace. He was bound by Spartan law and the oracle's prophecy. He and his 300 Spartans would remain. They would serve as the rearguard, holding the pass to cover their allies' retreat and fulfill their destiny. They were not entirely alone. In an act of extraordinary heroism that is often overlooked, the entire contingent of 700 soldiers from the city of Thespiae, led by their commander Demophilus, voluntarily chose to stay and die alongside the Spartans. Their sacrifice was a powerful testament to their courage. The 400 Thebans, however, are believed to have surrendered to the Persians during the final stand instead of fighting to the death. Some Spartan helots, servants, were also likely present. Thus, the rearguard was assembled. 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, 400 Thebans who mostly surrendered or were forced to stay, along with some Spartan helots, perhaps 1,500 men in total, against the full might of the Persian army. Knowing that the end was near, Leonidas reportedly instructed his men to eat a large breakfast, because that night they would dine in the underworld. When the final assault commenced, the Greeks did not remain behind their wall. They advanced into the wider part of the pass, determined to kill as many Persians as possible. What followed was a scene of pure, desperate violence. The remaining Greeks fought with a fury born of resolve. Herodotus writes that when their spears broke, they fought with their swords. When their swords shattered, they fought with their hands and their teeth. Leonidas fell in the heart of the battle, and a fierce struggle erupted over his body. Eventually, the sheer number of Persians overwhelmed them. The Greeks were pushed back to a small hill, where they made their final stand. Surrounded on all sides, they were finally wiped out by a storm of Persian arrows. By the end, virtually every last Spartan and Thespian lay dead. The hot gates had fallen. On the surface, Thermopylae was a clear victory for Persia. The path to southern Greece lay open, and Xerxes' army marched south, burning the evacuated city of Athens. In a final act of rage, Xerxes had Leonidas' body decapitated and crucified, an act considered barbaric even by the standards of the time. However, their sacrifice was far from meaningless. Strategically, the 3-day delay provided the Greek allies with invaluable time to prepare for the next phase of the war. A few weeks later, at the naval battle of Salamis, the Greek fleet, under the command of Themistocles, lured the larger Persian navy into narrow straits, much like at Thermopylae, and achieved a decisive victory. The following year, at the Battle of Plataea, a unified Greek army, inspired by the heroism at Thermopylae, crushed what remained of the Persian land forces, bringing an end to the invasion for good. But the true legacy of Thermopylae extends far beyond military strategy. It became a legend almost immediately. It was a significant propaganda victory for the Greeks, boosting morale and fostering a sense of unity that had never existed before. It became a timeless symbol of courage against insurmountable odds, of sacrifice for a greater good, and of the refusal to bow to tyranny. After the war, a stone lion was erected at Thermopylae to honor King Leonidas. A famous epitaph attributed to the poet Simonides was carved on a stone to commemorate the 300. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. For 2.5 millennia, the story of the 300 Spartans has inspired soldiers, leaders, and artists. It has been retold in poems, books, and the famous graphic novel and movie 300, which, while taking considerable artistic liberties, captured the raw, heroic spirit of the legend. Thermopylae serves as the ultimate reminder that history is not solely written by the victors. It is also shaped by the moral strength of those who refuse to yield, even in defeat. It is a story that demonstrates that a small group of determined individuals can alter the course of the world, and that certain defeats can be so glorious that they become immortal. The sacrifice at the Hot Gates was not an ending, but a beginning. It was the spark that ignited the flames of Greek resistance and ultimately helped preserve a culture that laid the foundation for Western civilization. If you're interested in exploring more legendary last stands and pivotal moments in history, be sure to subscribe to the channel and enable notifications. Please share in the comments which epic battle from history you would like us to cover next. Thank you for watching.